here. Again, I'm Tyson Glad. I'm a school psychologist in the district, and this is Melissa Glad. She's a school counselor in the district as well. And so we're looking forward to just kind of being here together and talking about this topic specifically with transitioning back to school. And I know school has already started. You know, we're kind of already past some of those initial beginning of the school transitions, but it's still a good topic for continued transitions throughout the school year. And into next school years and as kind of time progresses along. So we'll be kind of looking at this topic here together. And it's near and dear to us, especially because number one is our roles in the schools. You know, we work directly with students all the time and helping out with transitions. And we also have our own children that we're helping get through transitions through school. So it's an important topic that we really like to focus and emphasize. What we wanted to do first to kind of get started, this part, this is your section over here. We're going to be kind of jumping back and forth.
Okay. All right, so to get started, just to get your gears turning a little bit and thinking and reflecting, I would like for you to take about 2 to 3 minutes. So kind of put some thought into this. And I want you to, on the scratch paper that you have with your pen, put a thoughtful answer to this question. What helped you to get through a difficult transition? So thinking as adults, thinking back in your life, a difficult transition that you've been through. And I want you to think about what comes to mind for what helped you to get through that difficult transition. We'll take just a couple of minutes to think about that.
We're just going to say part of this is we do kind of want to share some, insights that you have, but this is also part of like a mindfulness exercise, something that you can do as individuals and with your children as well. And this also help us all get a little comfortable in the room together so we can all kind of speak together.
Okay. Thank you for taking the time to put some thought into that. The reason I wanted to start with that is because I think all of us can relate to a time, likely multiple times in our lives, where we have been through a transition that was super difficult for us. I think a lot of times as adults, we may sometimes think that whatever transitions or hard things our kids are going through, it may not be anything compared to what we've been through. And it can be hard for us to think back to what those transitions were like when we were younger. But I also like to think as adults, even though we've been through some really hard, difficult changes and transitions ourselves, our children are still so young and unexperienced that these transitions, such as going back to school, what we're talking about, and some other little transitions that we'll go into, it very well could be the hardest hard that they've ever had to deal with. So while it may not seem like it compares to maybe something we've experienced in our adult lives, it's super big and difficult for them. So sometimes it's just nice for us to take that time to think and remember what are some hard transitions that we've been through and to reflect on some things that helped us. And it can just help us to gain a little bit more empathy for our little ones too, remembering that they don't have as much life experience as us and that these transitions could be really difficult for them. So if you wouldn't mind, we would like to ask you to be brave and be willing to share a couple of things maybe that came to mind that have helped you through a difficult transition. If anyone's willing to share, you don't have to go into specifics, but maybe just things in general.
For me, I'm going through a difficult transition. Having friends, people to talk, not even people to give me advice, but people who would be willing to listen. Being just aware of my emotions and reminded that to take things one step at a time so I don't feel too overwhelmed. But really what makes the biggest difference is just having friends, people willing to listen. And so I feel like I have support, emotional support. And just the emotional support overall that helps me going through those times.
Thank you. Thank you for being willing to share that. And yes, having connections can be huge for getting through those difficult times in our lives. I also like how you touched on just reminding yourself that, just being aware of those emotions that you're having, also something that we typically tend to do more as adults that sometimes we don't think about as kids. A lot of times children, all they can see is what's in the moment, and they're not as good at thinking ahead or reflecting back on times that have helped us to get through hard times like we do as adults. Anybody else have anything that came to mind for what's helped you through a difficult time or transition? Yeah, please.
Just tag along what she was saying is that finding people that have gone through the same experience too. And then they might not even be friends or something. Maybe it's a parent that we're going to school, our kids are going to the same school or something, and just talking it up with them and just be like, oh, I can learn from what they're doing and what helped them and whatnot. And then,
Yeah.
connections, like you said.
Yeah, I love that. So being able to lean on the experiences of others and to be able to get through those hard times, to be able to find people that can relate to what you're going through is huge, to be able to get through those difficult times and transitions. We were going to do a pair share and then share out. So we're going to skip the next slide because we already took some time, but just keep that in mind as we move through and talk. Oh.
Absolutely. Go ahead and share. Absolutely, please. Is it okay if I bring the microphone around too? Okay.
Having some consistent activities or routines that you're still doing this, you've got that part figured out, and you have that regular thing that you can rely on and have.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it's this is like a little bit deeper, but especially if someone's going through like even like trauma or something very, very difficult, one of the best things we can do is maintain that consistency and that structure, right? Let's keep going to school. Let's keep engaging in extracurricular activities, spending time with family. Like those things are super important to help us through those transitions. Definitely. Thank you for sharing. Any other thoughts that we wanted to share? I don't want everyone to feel like they can't share. Okay, so these ones over here. So we want to start with something a little more reflective. These are a little bit more of like the warm-up slides, or we can just feel like a little more comfortable and being open over here. So on the left, it's my first day of kindergarten. Who has a child that is like this child on the left? Raise your hand. Woo, first day of school. I'm so ready for it. Okay, who has a child that's on the right over here? Yeah, see, even in the same families, our children are going to be so uniquely different from each other and have those different experiences, right? Okay, we got just a couple more of these kind of memes here, right? First day of school, second day of school. Yeah, I know teachers probably feel the exact same way, but it's a big transition, right? Getting off summer, getting back into school, that first day to new grade, new teacher, new kids. It's a big transition. I think we can all relate to this one as parents of children. Yeah, first day of school, great. They're with their friends. Perfect, wonderful. Okay, so like I said, those are kind of the warm-up slides over there.
So to get started, I just wanted to touch briefly. This model that we're looking at is Bloom's taxonomy model. So this is a classification system that's used to define and distinguish different levels of human cognition. Human cognition meaning the mental action or process of acquiring knowledge and understanding through thought, experience, and senses. So this is a good model for how we experience thinking, learning, and understanding. Now, this model has been used by educators for decades, typically used to inform or guide their development of assessments and also the curriculum that they use. Now, the reason why I want to bring this up again, keeping in mind that this is what teachers are using and taking into consideration when they want their students to learn something, not just learn it, but to be able to apply it and really understand it and be able to use that for critical thinking. So these are considered more lower levels of cognition. So recalling facts, basic concepts, then being able to explain the ideas of the concepts, being able to use that information in new situations. And then these are considered more higher levels of cognition, being able to draw connections between ideas, being able to justify a stand or a decision, and then ultimately at the top, what we really want to strive for is to be able to produce new or original work that's guided on these things that we've learned. So teachers use this all the time in guiding how they're teaching students. Come on in. So keep this in the back of your mind, and we'll show you what the connection is. Oh, I keep on wanting to change the slides over here. Could you go to the next slide? Now, with that in mind, I want to introduce you to one that we typically often use as counselors, or at least keep in the back of our minds, that guides some of the work that we do. This is called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So this model, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is a theory of motivation. It's a theory of motivation that states that 5 categories of human needs dictate an individual's behavior. So I'll show a video in just a minute that kind of explains a little bit more of this, but starting at the bottom, we have our basic needs. If this is what we're ultimately, our first priority of driving what we do, it drives our motivation, that we have air to breathe, water to drink, food, shelter, that we're getting sleep and clothing. If those needs are being met, then our motivation tends to turn to safety needs. We want to make sure that we're safe, that we have jobs, we have resources. If those needs are being met, then we tend to be motivated by love and belonging, later esteem, and then self-actualization, the desire to become the most that one can be. So that's what we're all striving for. But none of that's going to happen if we're not having our basic needs met. So would you mind going to the next slide, Tyson? So we're going to watch this video for just a minute that kind of explains a little bit more about this Maslow's hierarchy of needs concept.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a theory in psychology. Proposed his theory in 1943 after studying what he called exemplary people, or Eleanor Roosevelt. First, there are physiological needs, such as the need to breathe, eat, drink, or sleep. The moment we get enough of that and we feel awake and our lungs are full, we get motivated by the next thing. Now we want safety. We try to earn money, build up resources, and look for shelter that protects us against dangers. Once we are satisfied and feel safe, we have time to think about what we want next. At stage 3, we seek love and belonging. We desire to be close to family and friends, belong to a society, or join a gang. But the moment we feel completely part of a group, we already wish to be a little different than the rest. At stage 4, we look for esteem, self-confidence, and respect from our peers. We want to be someone. If we have money, we buy a fancy watch. If we have a brain, we write or think or work a lot. Motivation to perform and to compete is now at its highest. Students, sportsmen, and inventors excel. Neil Armstrong even flew to the moon. Only if we breathe and drink and eat and sleep enough, and we feel safe and part of a group and still special, only then can we reach level 5, self-actualization. Now we can relax, be creative, accept facts for what they are, give back or do whatever we want. No more pressure, unless of course there is trouble below. If you are a leader and believe in the theory, use it. First, make sure everyone is eating well. Then make them feel safe and help them belong to the group. Once they feel they belong, they are ready to stand out and excel. Thanks for watching. Even if we try to keep it short,
Don't go to the
each
next
video is quite some work. First, we will.
Okay, so we get the gist of that. So why are we talking about these models? Why are we talking about Bloom's taxonomy and Maslow's hierarchy of needs? And what in the world does that have to do with transitioning back to school? So I love this next slide. This is one that drives a lot of my thinking process and what I do in my realm of school counseling. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Tyson.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a
Don't worry, we won't make you watch it again. So Maslow before Bloom. The last step that we just saw on that Maslow's hierarchy of need, that self-actualization step, that's really where we need to be in order for Bloom to be able to happen. in order for our students to be able to be in a place where they are able to learn and to acquire this knowledge, for that knowledge to stick, for them to be able to apply it, for them to be able to be creative with it and to organize it in different ways, they have to be able to make sure that their needs are being met. And that's where a lot of the work that we do as parents really comes into play. So Maslow before Bloom, this was written by a teacher. If my students aren't well fed, don't feel safe, and aren't badly in or and are badly in need of hugs, they don't care where my questions land on Bloom. We must meet their basic needs first. So as a school counselor, when I have a student that comes into my office, almost every time at some point, I start asking questions like, how'd you sleep last night? How have you been sleeping? Did you eat breakfast this morning? How are you feeling today? Do you feel like you have friends at school? Do you feel like you have connections? Do you feel like you have someone that you can talk to at home? We get to a lot of those questions because what I'm really looking for is this student even in a position to be able to learn? Maybe they got sent out of the classroom because the teacher's like, they're not doing anything, they're causing disruptions. So that's where I start to think, what needs do they have that maybe aren't being met yet? And it really starts more than anything in our homes with those daily routines and those daily little transitions that we do.
So from the National Association of School Psychologists, they are great giving out publications and articles on all sorts of topics for students and families in the school system and the community as well. Just kind of from one of their articles, it was just talking about back to school transitions, back to school basics, and they had a number of suggestions and ideas, especially for before school starts. And I know we're kind of past that point before school starts. That's totally fine because there's a lot of these things we can still kind of think about and reflect on. Now, we're not going to like dive into every single one of these. We'll kind of want to focus a little bit deeper on a few of them, but just kind of orient to a few of the suggestions here from the National Association of School Psychologists. Before school starts, making sure our children are in good physical, mental health, right? Checking in with their pediatrician, their dentist, their optometrist, making sure they're all good to go with that transition before school year starts. Making sure us as parents, we're getting the emails from the schools, we're getting the newsletters, we're adding those dates and information to our calendar, and we're staying on top of all those important moving pieces, getting our school supplies early. One that's kind of really, really important that we'll talk a little bit more about is the reestablishing bedtime and mealtime routines. They suggest at least a week before to start working on that routine, but we'll talk a little bit about that kind of the next slide. But that's a really big one, especially how Melissa was sharing that we're looking to first make sure the basic needs of our children and for ourselves are being met before we can go into those higher tiers of access and growth. Turning off the TV. We're starting to curb a little bit of our electronic use during the before we get into the school year is a big one. We'll touch a little bit more on that one. Could be helpful to go visit the school when you're doing the clothes shopping, which is like probably the worst part about getting ready for school to start. Trying to find backpacks and shoes and everything. They suggest, you know, since school usually starts end of summer, just get some stuff to get through summer, some things for beginning of fall, and maybe hold off on some of the winter things just to make that a little bit easier. And for especially students in secondary and elementary as well, in the home, making sure we have a good clear space where this is where we're going to do homework, kind of that nice cognitive space for it. Right, just have a good place for backpacks, lunch boxes, freeze a few easy dinners. These are things just to help with the chaos of that beginning transition. And we'll talk about this too. This isn't just beginning of the school transitions. There's some big ones that come up too, you know, coming back from winter break, spring break, even sickness and some of those other transitions there. So there's a few suggestions there, you know, some of them you're probably doing, maybe a few are a good reminder, but we just want to touch on a few like really high leverage ones for students and for families. So one of them, like I was saying before, was reestablishing your bedtime routine and your mealtime routine at least a week before school starts. A week is great. When you go a little bit more from this, I was looking at some information from the CDC and some other sleep studies, and they were saying If you can't even 2 weeks earlier, and some children even 3 to 4 weeks are going to need that much time to adjust their sleep schedules before going back to school, and not to do it in one go. And I am so guilty of this because my summer schedule was terrible. I stay up late, I sleep in, and same thing for my kids. And when I'm like, okay, I need to start adjusting my schedule, then that first night, I'm like, I'm gonna go to bed this time and I wake up at this time. And it doesn't happen. I'm laying in bed, I can't fall asleep. And it takes a little bit more time to adjust the sleep schedule. And it's better to go like 15, 30-minute increments as you adjust that sleep schedule for that transition. We'll talk a little bit more about mealtime and general routines, but just get a little bit, oh, not yet, can't go to that one. Okay, think for a second with your own children and think about how many hours of sleep are my children getting? Think about their age, my 8-year-old is getting this much sleep. Just take a minute, think in your head, how many hours of sleep are my children getting? Okay. Not yet? Okay. Just wait a second. Think about all your children. Yes. Think about each one. Yeah, write it down. Think about your middle school and your high school. Fair warning, they need a lot more sleep than we think. I go for it? Okay. So take a look over here about how much sleep we should be getting. And we'll focus on our children. We can think about adults too, but we'll think about the children. For our preschoolers, 3 to 5 years old, 10 to 13 hours of sleep, which include naps. For our school-age children, this is from 6 all the way up to 12, 9 to 12 hours of sleep for our school-age children. And then for our teenagers, 13, 18 years, 8 to 10 hours of sleep for our teenagers there. Yeah. You don't have to answer, but just think to yourself now, how much sleep is my kid getting, and are they getting enough to make sure they're sleeping? Because then think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We really want to get sleep, nutrition, diet, connection, those things in a good place for our children. Let me just see if I share this one here. Okay, yeah. So I'll go into this part. And these are just some tips for sleep as well. Sometimes they call it sleep hygiene, and these are things that just are going to help us build towards getting a really good night's sleep, and to be mindful of for adults and for children. So, being consistent with what time we're going to bed and what time we're getting up, making sure the rooms are quiet, dark, relaxing, nice, comfortable temperature. Usually it's better if it's a little bit cooler. Making sure we don't have electronic devices, TVs, computers, phones. They say from the bedroom, but I mean, it's not super realistic, right? Let's be honest. Like, we're going to keep our stuff in there, but at least turning it off. We'll talk a little bit more, but at least having those devices off 30 minutes, even 60 minutes before we're trying to get to sleep, making sure that melatonin is getting produced, staying away from meals, big meals, caffeine, and getting some exercise. So a few years ago, I was kind of consulting with a parent, and they had a young child that was having some really, really big difficulties at school with that transition at being at school. And it's just kind of really difficult. And so we were doing that same thing. How are they sleeping? How are they eating? Let's talk about some of these basic things. And the parent, and she's amazing, but she was telling me that her young child, like in the middle of the night, would start crying out for chocolate milk, just crying out for chocolate milk. And she's like, I really need him to sleep, and so I'm going to give him chocolate milk. And yeah, he'd go to sleep, he's got his belly full of chocolate milk. But of course, disrupting that sleep schedule, drinking a bunch of that sugary chocolate milk in the middle of the night was just wrecking him during the next day. So, this was one of those cases like, okay, actually did work, but they took away the chocolate milk, the 1 o'clock in the morning chocolate milk thing, and lo and behold, he was doing so much better at school. So much better. And it was just kind of focusing on that sleep piece. And just to kind of really hit that point one more time, even further back a few years ago, I was able to be part of a multidisciplinary clinical team. We're working where we had everyone. We had psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, nutritionists, everyone, a whole team to support individuals with various needs. And one of the first things they would always do was to make sure they were getting quality sleep, put them through sleep studies and making sure getting that sleep. Because almost always, once we got sleep under control, a lot of any sort of dietary, behavioral, social concerns really improved. So, we could probably talk about sleep all night because it is that important, but really trying to get that good sleep routine down for our children. And no chocolate milk right there. Okay, so for our next part, we're going back to just some of those mealtime routines.
We won't talk into too much detail about this, but again, just kind of taking some time to reflect on how your kids are eating throughout the day, how they're eating for each meal. What we really want to strive for are nutritionally balanced meals as much as possible, fresh fruits and vegetables and grains and proteins at each meal. And also the importance of making time to enjoy meals together. I know that seems like it's becoming increasingly more and more difficult in the business of our lives. If nothing else, you can't manage to do more than just one meal a week where you're all sitting down around the table, then at least that's something. At least strive for just one night where everyone puts everything to the side, no electronics at the table, not even laying face down on the table, take everything away and just enjoy a meal together and take some time is such a great opportunity to be able to connect as a family. A few tips from psychiatrist Dr. Julie Linker. She said to adjust to fit your children's stage of life. So we know that those of us who have little ones, or if you've had little ones in the past, it can be hard to get them to sit down to just be at the table for a full meal, and that's okay. They're at least still seeing the example of the family sitting around together and starting to learn that habit and behavior. To try your best to keep meals positive at the family table. We want this to be an opportunity where they're reflecting on this is a good time. Like, we're happy, we're sitting together. Maybe try to save some of those frustrating stories for later when the kids aren't at the table. Just try to keep the dinner time positive so that it can just have a good connection feeling. Make it screen free. Like we said, that's an important one. If it's on the table and we hear it vibrate, we're so tempted to pick it up and look at it. And we want our kids to know that our attention, the most important thing we could be doing right now is to just be focusing on the family and keeping that time special. Ask specific questions, and we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later, but that's a great time to be able to reflect with your kids on their day. Some of the questions that we like to use at our dinner table are, what's something that happened today that made you laugh? And everyone sits and thinks for a minute, and then someone will usually share a story, which usually leads to stuff that didn't even happen that day, but just asking some specific reflective questions, again, a great opportunity to connect as a family. Invite your kids' friends over to eat dinner with you. It's a great opportunity for the friends to be able to just see, that connection time as a family, and also for your kids to be able to enjoy that connection time as a family with also some peers that they really enjoy as well. So whatever it is, just make it work for you. It doesn't have to be, a big fancy to do. If all you can throw together that night is a bowl of cereal, at least you're just sitting as a family and just connecting together, just looking at each other is so important. Let's see. Oh, we'll go back to this one.
So just going back to some of those routines, of course, you have the mealtime routines, but again, we were talking about before that consistency and routines for our children are so crucial and helpful to help them progress successfully through whatever comes at them in life. And sometimes and this isn't something you have to do, but sometimes it can be helpful to take something that's kind of like, at least for us as adults, like getting ready for the day. For us, that's pretty cut and dry, but sometimes our children do need us to take something that's like a big skill or task and to break it up into different steps for them and kind of teach them all those moving pieces. And some of the big important times, some big daily transitions are before school, after school, and then in the evenings for kind of that bedtime routine also. So these are some charts that I was working on for my son. And I'm going to kind of use for my other children too, because you guys probably feel the same way, but I feel like every single morning and every single day, I'm telling my kids to do the same thing every single day, over and over and over. It drives me crazy, and I know it just drives them crazy too. I'm just trying to help them to build this routine, build this structure, have them a great start to their day and a great start when they come back from school also. So for example, before school, you can see, and you have the papers there too. I just have some stuff for my son to help have a good morning routine. One thing that we're trying to really include this for this last little bit here is have like a little mindfulness exercise, maybe doing a little meditation, a little breathing exercise, visualizing successes for his day, and then just share something positive with us as parents too. So just breaking some things up before school, after school, and then in the evening at bedtime. And at least for this chart too, some of our children are a little bit on the younger end too. So they're still really motivated for some of those like more tangible things. So our chart here is they can mark off when they're doing it. And then my son, he loves cheeseburgers and games, and he doesn't watch Friends, but this is more like he plays with friends. It's kind of this thing. So just having some stuff they can work towards also. When we're younger, that kind of helps. When we're older, it's like, I can get Wendy's whenever I want. I don't know about that. So it's kind of good to have some of these routines and schedules. And these just have some ideas here for you all. But just kind of with what we've talked about so far, we give you guys a copy of just some of the templates for routines or procedures for your children. On one side has the examples and the other side's kind of blank. So we do want to take just a few minutes and maybe put down some things that think about, maybe too, some things that you tell your kids to do like all the time that you might want to have built into a schedule for them to see. Maybe things that you want to include as part of their routine. So like, for example, exercise is super important. So I've been trying to get my kids to, when they come home from school and have a snack, to do at least 10 minutes of exercise. And what I found also is that in the morning, especially, where it just drags to get everyone out the door, having this in place, like my son, he just like flies through it. And he gets everything done, and he even has a little bit of free time in the morning, which helps him to feel good when he's going to school for the day. So take a few minutes and maybe think about what's some stuff you want to add to your routines. What are some things you find yourself telling your children all the time that you want to add there? And maybe even just note maybe some stuff you are already doing, because we would like to kind of hear some ideas and suggestions from everyone. So we'll just take a few minutes on this one, and then we'll bring it back for all of us to kind of discuss together for some ideas there.
This could be a good time too, if you have already written down some ideas for routines. You might want to reflect on some things that we've shared about sleep hygiene, and maybe write down just one goal that you feel like you and your family could work on to improve your sleeping routines. And the same thing with meals, maybe just one small, simple goal that you'd like to maybe apply in your family that you think could help to have more connection, or maybe more nutritious meals, whatever you feel like could be helpful.
Okay, so again, you don't have to share if you don't want to, but it'd be great maybe if you guys had any good ideas you would share, or any sort of other suggestions or anything like that, regarding maybe some transitions or ideas for things during the day for your children. Who's got the big ideas they want to share? And so this thing right here, like I was saying before, like getting ready for the day is like such a big task. And one thing is called a task analysis, where we take that big task and we break it up into little manageable pieces to kind of shape it. So it's kind of exactly that piece that you were talking about. So take something that's maybe for us as adults not too bad, but for a child, it's like, whoa, okay, like, you want me to do all that, and break it up for them. Have some visuals, reinforcement too. Yeah. Other thoughts?
Thing, but we would do a chore chart. And especially with my son, if it was like you said, with your boy, if it's written, it's as good as done. If I asked him, it was a fight, but having it written was huge. So that's a big deal.
Yeah, because you do, it sometimes take away some of that conflict too, and some of that frustration. And if it works where you can have some sort of reinforcement tied to it, then it's even like motivating for them. Like I said, luckily for my son, because they just built a Wendy's close to where we live, he is so motivated by cheeseburgers right now. I'm like, I'm going to take advantage of this like every single day. You can have as many as you want, as long as we're, keep me going here. Yeah.
But I like the idea of visual. I'm such a visual person, and I know my kids are too. So adding some pictures to it, making it
even it doesn't have to be like that. You make it work for you. It doesn't have to be the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It could just be first get dressed, next brush your teeth, just like a picture of it. And you can laminate it and get one of those expo markers. They can cross it off when they're done. And just them being able to see themselves checking off those little step-by-steps can be really fun and rewarding enough in and of itself, because it helps them to feel accomplished. Everyone's just a little bit different, and what helps them to feel like they're staying on task or getting stuff done or they've been successful at something.
Other thoughts anyone wanted to share with that? Yeah.
It's easier to memorize something written out when it is in colors. Brain, when it's putting and organizing information, if it's all black and white, it's almost as if it's going into the same storage space and can get cluttered, so to speak. So trying different colors is very helpful as well, even as adults.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And just having that kind of mapped out where it corresponds a little bit with their days and the activities. I tried to kind of do that. Blues for bedtime, right? Kind of waking up colors there. So let's use everything, right? Every little aspect of, attention and motivation. Use every piece of it. Thank you.
If it's visually appealing, then it can be if your child really likes Ninja Turtles, put a picture of the Ninja Turtle like doing something for getting dressed. Like anything that just makes it a little bit more engaging and personalized.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Other comments? These are great. Okay.
Let's go back to devices for a minute, talking about these, preparing ourselves for all the little transitions each day. Turning off the TV and devices. Okay. First off, just want to point out the importance of avoiding games and shows before school. Now, we just talked about a way that it could potentially help to keep your kids on task in the morning, even if they're teenagers getting stuff done. I mean, maybe teenagers aren't going to want to have a mark-off chart, but if that's where we're at with them, for them to remember what they need to do, then that's where we're at. But sometimes they'll want to get that done. So it's like, okay, well, I did all my things. Can I watch a show or can I go play my games? I can't tell you how many times working in the elementary realm, I would have these kids coming in and they were just so not ready for the day, not mentally ready. And I check in with them and be like, how was your morning? And, they ate breakfast, they slept good, but then they were playing this game before school and they were so mad because they lost. So yeah, it's preparing themselves mentally for the day. So even though it's kind of like, well, you got yourself ready, that's so cool, maybe we want to reward you with something, I'd really suggest not letting that be TV shows, video games, turning off the electronics, because those activities are so highly rewarding that to start your day off with something that's so fun and engaging for kids, and then be like, all right, go grab your books and be ready to focus on math, can be a really difficult transition for them to make. So I would recommend having something like a book, or they can just go lay in their bed. Our son likes to look at his Pokemon cards or bug his sisters, read his favorite books, but just try to find something that they can do that's not games or shows. Avoiding devices in the bedrooms, that's another big one. Even in our elementary schools, it breaks my heart when I find out that some of my elementary students have a phone in general, but that's okay. Everyone's different. If nothing else, please, please, please make sure that those devices are checked into you before they go to bed at night. Because I have a lot of students, more than I would love to admit, who come in, they're falling asleep during class. You're like, what is going on? We check in with them and they got up in the middle of the night. They grabbed their device, their video games or their phone, and they were watching it or playing it all night long. And their brains are so not ready for a school environment. So you may think, oh, but they know they're not supposed to be on their devices, and they put them away. And I watched them put it in their drawer before bed. Remove that temptation, get it out of their rooms, take away the cords. You have the power as the parents, hide the cords, lock them up if you have to, even for your teenagers, because as we just talked about, that sleep is so crucial for them to be able to have success during their days, to be able to feel good, to be able to feel successful, to be able to feel like they're ready to engage with their peers and with their learning environment. They say to turn off blue lights at least 1 hour before you go to bed. And that's for us adults too. Phones,
and TVs. And I know there's nothing better than just laying in bed at night when you're tired and scrolling through your phone for hours. But that blue light that gets into our eyes, our body processes that, our brains process that as sunlight. So if your brain is processing that the sun is out in your face, and then you try to just turn it off and go to bed, your brain's going to be like, we're not ready for this. Like, we've got all the chemicals going, we're ready to go play, the sun's still out. And so it's so hard to fall asleep. But if you can get yourself into a good routine and set that example for your kids of just turning off your phones, turning off the shows. I know that means you have to maybe engage with your spouse, which can be really hard. But just talking about your day or reading a book. There's so many different books out there. I wasn't a reader before, but it's become one of my most favorite ways to just kind of turn down for the night. Or I like to play some audio things too. Sometimes I'll play a book on my phone while I listen to it, and that's okay because I'm at least keeping that blue light out of my eyes. And then again, like we talked about, get those devices off the table. Do it when you go out for dinner too. Don't leave that device on the table because we do it so automatically now. You hear the or you know, and you want to pick it up and see what that is, those devices. Okay, I'll just say this real quick. There's a really good book that I've been reading that I highly recommend called The Power of Fun. It's a really fun book, and it talks about how we lose our playfulness as we become adults, and that's so unfortunate. Fun comes down to having flow, which means we're engaged in something without thinking about the future or the past or the time. You're just really into that moment. Fun comes down to playfulness. You're doing something that's unique, something that's novel. And in that book, they talk about how these phones and devices that we love so much, and they are so helpful, they have been created to keep us addicted to that phone. These apps and things are free, but they're really not, because we're paying for it with our time and our attention. And there are really intelligent scientists that go into the creation of these apps for how can we get them to check more often to get their attention for advertisement and things. So your brain is addicted. We're all addicted. So anything you can do, put those phones in your back pocket when you're eating dinner or just in your room. So again, just remembering to turn off devices as much as possible, especially at night times and when you're engaging with the family.
So we hit on, like we said, we want to hit on like a few really high leverage areas that help with transitions, big transitions, small transitions. We were looking at first from that NASP article, things before school. And this is a few things. They say it's for the first week, but again, this can be applied at any time, you know. So a few things is making sure that they say have a clear schedule for the first week. We're already past the first week, but now at least having some degree of flexibility in our schedule as things arise. You know, if you're doing home lunches, make it the night before, making sure we're setting our alarm clocks. And even if you have younger children, you can start with alarm clocks with them at a pretty young age as well. And it's good too if they have, like I said, like a little chart or something where they're really working on being independent, self-sufficient. They got their alarm goes off, they start with the routine for the day, and have a really good start there. Make sure there's plenty of extra time when you're trying to get to school. You want to have that good kind of peaceful energy as we're transitioning, and get ready for after school as well. What are we going to do for maybe a snack? What's homework going to look like? And let's get our routine down for after school, because that's a really big transition too. Reviewing your child's school books. Mostly what they're saying here is they're just talking about figure out what your child's going to be learning that school year. You know, share positivity about learning, about accessing school. You're excited to be engaging in this, and just having another like communication connection moment with your child. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but just to kind of finish this off, you can get in contact with your teacher, your student's teacher, and just get to know other school professionals at your local school. You know, the school psychologist, the school counselor, the school social worker, which administrators are over which areas. Sometimes one's over academics, sometimes one over social behavioral. Community outreach partners. There's a lot of resources. So just kind of get familiar with what are some of the names and faces and what sort of services or supports they can provide, because they'll kind of provide something unique. Everyone has their own kind of niche and interests. So like I said, just kind of focusing on one area specifically, talking to our children about school. How familiar does this sound? And I'm channeling my younger brother when I was thinking about this, because this is him all the time. It's like, how was your day today? And it's good. What did you do? I can't remember. I don't know. And it's like, well, okay, now we're home. Now just let's have a snack and do your homework. Like, okay, we're done with that. So communicating with our children, communication in general, is probably one of our most highest leverage tools to help us navigate difficult things. And transitions in school can be a difficult thing. Just communication. Sometimes it's just having someone you can communicate with. Other times it can be for some problem solving. And so as much as possible, we all do that thing. How's your school? How's school today? Or with your spouse? How's work today? Good, good. Okay, good. We covered that social norm. We can move on to the next thing. We can take that moment, and it can be a really reflective and powerful moment for children. It doesn't even have to be a big thing. You don't have to commit a huge amount of time to that. So just a few potential strategies to help with that communication with children and with others. One thing is asking more open-ended questions as opposed to close-ended. Close-ended, it's going to be yes or no answers. Open-ended are more of like the how questions. Now, how was your day today is technically an open-ended question, right? But there's still people who are going to be like, I was good, I'm done. So it can be helpful, some follow-up prompts are like, hey, tell me one thing that made you feel happy today. Tell me one thing that made you feel frustrated today. We don't have to get a full dialogue of the entire day. And we've talked a lot about our daughter or our son. Our daughter, she's one where it's like, tell us about your day. And she's like, well, first I woke up and I opened my eyes, and then, I got a drink of water, and then I started brushing my teeth. And it's like, okay, no, this is too much. Tell me one thing that made you happy today, and something that maybe was frustrating for you today. And again, we're looking for that quality communication piece. And then something else also, journaling and notes as a form of communication might be a really great way to connect, especially if you have really busy schedules. So for example, you can get a little notebook, and you as the parent can just put a little note in there, just a little message like, hey, how are you doing? How was your day? Tell me something. Put it on their bed. So maybe part of their bedtime routine is opening that up and writing a little response, and then you pick it up the next day. And in one way, it's a nice different way to communicate, especially if you have a busy schedule. But again, also just something about writing is so powerful in helping us process difficult things, because we're starting to use a little bit more of the frontal lobe. We're writing with our hands, and it's forcing us to process events in a different way. We kind of tried the journal thing with our kids. They're a little bit younger, so I'd suggest maybe if they're just a little bit older, that way they're spending less time in the process of actually writing, but a little bit more time in actually expressing themselves. So those are just some potential strategies there. Okay, we want to continue though with communication, because again, very important topic for connection.
So I'll try to fly through these a little bit faster. So on communicating with your child, an important thing to do is to paraphrase, even with your spouse. If they say something to you, it's good to just be like, oh, so first this happened and then you went to them, or, just kind of when they tell you, oh, I got into a fight with my friend and they said something mean to me. Oh, so your friend said something mean to you and it caused a fight. I know that sounds so cheesy, but just repeating to them what they told you just helps them to know that you were listening to them. So paraphrasing is a really helpful way. If your spouse says it, just watch what happens to your spouse. If they come home and tell you what happened with their day, and then you just say, oh my gosh, so you had a really busy meeting and it made you feel stressed. Like just repeat what they said. And I can guarantee, or like if they do that to you, it's really nice. You're like, oh, you really listened to me. Like it sounds cheesy, but it really works. Asking clarifying questions. So just digging a little bit deeper into that. So tell me more about that. I love that phrase. Tell me more. Again, try using that with your spouse too. It'll just like make them feel so special. They tell you something, you're like, whoa, tell me more about that. How was that? Just makes us feel that we're being heard. Validate their feelings. I'm going to go back to what I said early in the presentation. Please, 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 if your child is telling you that something hard is going on, hold yourself back if you're tempted to use a phrase, something like, just wait until, or that's nothing compared to, okay? That is the opposite of validating what your kid's going through. That very well, that fight with their friend today at school over a piece of gum where someone got a bigger half than them could very well be the hardest hard they've ever had to deal with. even though they haven't dealt with a job loss, you know, like some of those adult hards, it's still hard for them. So validate what they're feeling. It's so helpful to just hear, that is really hard. We talked earlier about what helps you to get through a hard time, and I heard a comment that was just hearing that someone else has been through an experience like that before is really helpful. So when your child shares with you something hard that they've gone through, it makes a huge world of difference if you just validate them by saying, that's really hard. I'm really sorry that that happened. Tell me about how that made you feel, or tell me more about that. Just validating that their feelings are valid just as much as ours are valid. We already talked about that. Oh, resist the urge to solve the problem. We are so good at solving problems. We love solving other people's problems. But don't do it to your kids, especially your teenagers, because it's gonna drive them nuts. They're smarter than you think. Even those elementary kiddos, they know how to solve problems. So just kind of leading them instead of saying, well, just go talk to your teacher, or just go tell that kid that they're an idiot. You know, like, don't try to solve the problem for them. Just be like, wow, that would be hard. What do you think would help? And just get them to solve the problem, because a lot of times we just want to vent. We don't want someone to fix our problem for us. We just want someone to hear us. Go ahead on the next one. This is just a quick little video that we thought would be helpful to share. I really love this. These things that we've been talking about, communicating with our family members. It's all about, and again, I know this may sound cheesy, but creating a safe place, meaning that it's your place for them to share how they're really feeling. And I really love how he goes into that in this little video clip. Hey.
I kind of went into my dinner room, and I was thinking, okay, well, it sounds like you're going to do well school, but let's start at the bottom. And I said, well, how are you sleeping? Not very well, actually. We talked about that. Are you eating well? But I've been 10 hours in the last 6 months. Getting anything for extra? No. If we kind of start processing it, I say, maybe we want to have some space, a little more sunshine. And he's kind of sort of head down. And I said, I really want to know how you're doing about dropping out of high school. We talked about that. And we continued to talk. And I think I heard that all the things in my mind, how do I say? How do I judge him? How do I not fix this? How do we sort of figure out how to collaborate? And at some point, Nathan started just crying. And I had no idea why. Tears. And he said, Dr. Swenson, for the last 2 weeks, I've driven to school. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 6 hours, and then I drove home. He was too anxious to face the school administrator, too overwhelmed to talk to his parents or to drop out. It was devastating. And I felt so grateful to be the first person to told that to, and I thanked him. And we made a lot of progress after that, moving him forward, talking about his relationship, and then putting together a plan for school, which he did go back and he did graduate. And he just needed a safe place. He needed a safe place to talk.
So again, just reflecting on how are we creating safe places in our homes with our loved ones that they can just talk and just feel validated and listened to. Mini transitions. We've been talking about the back to school transition. All these things that we've shared apply to transitions, especially with little ones. Just talking through the day. We're going to get in the car. We're going to go to the store. We're going to pick up the eggs and the milk. Then we're going to come home. We're going to start our homework. Just kind of giving them a little play-by-play of what's happening through the day can really help with transitions. Otherwise, they're just, going from one place to the next. That would drive me crazy as an adult. If someone was just telling me, okay, now come over here. Okay, now do this. And I had no idea what I was going through. So it's helpful to just kind of break things down like we've talked about. Transitioning from maybe preferred or very rewarding activities like video games. And sometimes it's turn the game off. It's time for bed. And that could be such a hard transition for them because they're so engaged in something that they really enjoy doing. So we like to do those little warnings like, hey, in 15 minutes, it's going to be time to turn off that game and we're going to get ready for bed. Okay, 10 more minutes, time to turn off that game. We're going to get ready for bed. We got 5 more minutes, 1 more minute. And again, as they just kind of start to get used to that, you don't have to give as many warnings, but just you're talking through the transitions, you're letting them know what to prepare. And it's not just a boom, games are off, go get ready for bed. That's when you're going to see that
the explosion because they're mad. You just took them away from something fun. Give them choices, even if it's choices that you want them to do. Like, we got to get ready for bed. Do you want to brush your hair first or do you want to brush your teeth first? They're still going to get ready for bed. But maybe find some kind of a way to give them some kind of a choice. Pre-teaching a situation. If you know that when you're going through the grocery store, they're always going to ask you for that candy bar. You start talking about it in the car. Okay, we're going to the store. We're going to get those eggs and milk we talked about. When we get up to the counter, we are not going to ask for candy bars. Okay, that's not something that we're going to do. And then if you do good with that next time, then we'll talk about maybe we can get it the time after. But I'm just kind of talking and preparing them for those transitions so you don't see as many of those meltdowns that we see in the grocery store. Role playing, again, may sound cheesy and unnatural, but it's so helpful to have your kids, maybe they have to have a difficult conversation with a teacher about a grade. You can tell them, okay, pretend I'm your teacher. What are you going to say when you approach me? And just have them walk through it like, whoa, I've got a lot of missing assignments. What do I do? But just like practicing saying those things can help build their confidence and help them with those transitions of learning new techniques. Even the weekends, all the weekends, we want to party so hard and stuff ourselves with pizza and stay up until 11 o'clock at night. And those weekends go by so fast. And then we all crash and burn on Mondays. You guys should come into schools on Mondays. It's so fun. So fun because we're still hungover from those weekends. So try to keep routines consistent and not go off track too much during weekends and holidays. Progress monitoring. If your kids if their teachers are using Dojo, if they're using Canvas, emailing the teachers, take the time. I know it may seem overwhelming, like a big task for you to create those parent user Canvas accounts. Whoa, so boring, but it's so helpful and so powerful because when you ask your kid, hey, do you have homework in science tonight? And they say no, and you can open it up and say, oh, really? Because that's not what it says right here. Like you have that power as an adult. Check the Dojo, communicate with the teachers. I get a lot of emails from parents who are like, oh, this teacher's the worst. Can we just take him out of the class? We're like, oh, I'd love to do that. But then we're just teaching them to run away from the problems. So first, have you reached out to the teacher yet? Has your student talked to the teacher yet? Those are crucial learning experiences too. We're all going to have to work with difficult people in our lives. We need to start teaching our kids from a young age how to talk and work through those problems instead of just escaping it. But that can be so tempting, I know. I want to escape a lot of my problems too. Go ahead to the next one.
And just really quick, I just want to take a time check here, because it would be nice if we had a little bit of time, maybe just for kind of questions and sharing too, because I think we're already at 7:47.
Okay.
So what do you think? You want to just go to these ones real quick?
Just go to the next one real fast. We're almost there. Okay, this one, you can look into this later if you find it interesting. This is the Kubler-Ross Model, and it basically talks about the stages of change. I find this super fascinating. So I see this happen a lot in schools. Everyone comes in, it's like, whoa, this is cool, we're back, and it's kind of like exciting. And then a couple weeks later, and it's like, oh my gosh, like this is a routine and we really have to come here every single day. And then this is when I start getting the emails from the parents. I don't know what's happening, but my kid is miserable. People are being mean to them. They're making no friends. That's because the kids are going home and they're telling their parents, this is the worst. Like, my life is over. I'm not making any friends. Everyone's really mean. These are just some normal stages of going through big transitions. We've probably done it too as adults. When you start a new job, I can see a lot of these patterns in some of the new situations of starting a new job that I've been into. And just know, like, that'll pass. Just give it time for these routines to set in. Give it some time and just have some patience. And then we have one more. This is just a quick little video about transitioning back to school from all ages that we really liked her tips and thought that it went well with what we were speaking about.
On the first day, when your child is making the transition from your school, they might be a little nervous. Parents are probably a little nervous. So the transitioning kindergarten, middle school, or high school, it is a whole new world. New School's Parent Academy is offering help so that everyone's prepared. Sonia McSwain with the John Love Early Learning Center is with us today. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I have a fifth grader, and I'm already a little nervous about that. And we're not talking about school yet, but I see it, and I know there's some changes. You know, when we talk about the little ones or kindergartners, I always hear the quick drop-off. So the drop-off is back away and moving. Absolutely. We want children to familiarize themselves with the building and get to know the staff without the comfort of mom and dad around, because that usually creates more anxiety. So we ask parents on that first day to embrace the children, let them know what to expect, but to do the very quick drop off and ensure that they're coming back for them later that day. They're going to have a great time with us, probably. Yeah, I mean, most kids will have a great birthday. What about those kids that now they have a little bit of an introduction to kindergarten, and then the second day they're like, oh, that transition is made easier by parents informing the children about what to expect prior to getting there, exposing them to books that talk about what to expect during kindergarten, and participation possibly in the orientations that schools will have prior to school opening so children get a chance to meet the teacher, see the classroom, get to see what the big school is like prior to their birthday. And it's okay if they cry a little bit. Eventually that will stop for sure, absolutely. Let's talk about middle school, because this is the one that I hear is just so tough, because really you're trying to teach the kids to be responsible. So some of that onus goes on them instead of the parents. Communication between the teacher and the parent kind of cuts off a little bit. How can they kids be prepared for that bigger role and more responsibility? Organization is going to be the key to their success, being organized, being able to take really great notes and follow directions is really going to help propel those students. We ask the parents not to really cut themselves off of the teacher, but to keep that open line of communication and having access to the parent portal, which is wealth of information for parents, will keep parents up with grade and announcements from the schools throughout the school year. I do wonder, should the teacher and the parent be communicating, or are you literally like, okay, you need to ask your teacher this? You know, I kind of feel like right now I'm making this all, I go right to the teacher, and I don't necessarily go through my child all the time. Parents and teachers should have a lot of communication open, but we want to encourage our students to become a bit more independent in middle school and be able to have those conversations with their teachers once a month. Put all your responsibilities in the bag, you know, they didn't work it off. Follow the direction. So we're working on that this year. Okay, what about high school? There are many adults, or at least they think they are. That also can be a bit challenging. I think even more socially, that becomes a change for kids. It's slightly awkward for students if they get into high school, but again, talking to children about what to anticipate, participating in orientation so they can see the school, see the building, get to know the rituals and routines of those schools will alleviate some of that anxiety and help students to transition to their high school space really easily. Sounds like the advice is kind of saying in every direction. It's just age appropriate, and that will be communication between the kids and the parents. And you guys are offering some help, so we just scratched the surface. So what are you offering for the parents to make sure that they can dig a little deeper? What's the night we're offering and other ways transition to kindergarten?
Okay, so that's the end piece over there. Okay. Well, we're hoping for a little bit extra time. We even, when we're preparing, we're like, I don't know if we have enough. But we're with kind of a little bit of time that we have here, we went over a lot of information, a lot of different things. Maybe a lot of the stuff you already know. Sometimes it's a reminder. Maybe there's just a couple of things like, oh, that might be kind of a good idea. You do not have to remember everything. You know, that's not how it works. We're just kind of taking things as we're continuing to progress. But we are kind of interested in, was there something that was either maybe an aha moment for you? Was there something that you'd like to take and to apply now? Or is there something that maybe was a good reminder for you? It'd be great just to maybe just hear a little bit from you all. And also if you have any questions too, because I think we have just a little bit more time that we could use for that as well. More or less. Yeah, is everyone ready to go to bed?
One thing that I liked tonight is a lot of those scenes they have seen or read somewhere already, but it's the reminder because as parents, we try, we start, and maybe a month into it, we forget, and then we're not consistent. And this is really great because just that reinforcement for us to keep doing it because it works.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing.
There was a part where you talked about how, I did get the bigger piece of gum and the problems that children go through. It was a great reminder that those may seem trivial to me as an adult, but to a child, that may be the worst thing they're going through in the whole day. And to be sensitive to that, to listen and validate the feelings, that was a great reminder.
Yeah,
I'd be the same. What if you worked on a project with a partner at work and you got $200 and they got $600? You'd be like, what? That's a big problem. So it's the same thing. We just kind of bring it down to their scale and remind ourselves like that's big for them in their world still. Thank you. All right, friends. Thank you so much for bearing with us, for your patience, and for your attention. Appreciate you coming.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.